For those just joining now, we're just waiting for everyone to come in and we'll be kicking off in a couple of minutes. Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's Thanksgiving. Now I'm sitting in London and I'm British, so that probably doesn't affect me too much. TS is not sitting in London. He's sitting over in the West Coast. So incredibly grateful for joining today. For those who don't know me, my name is Charlotte Crosswell. I'm Chief Executive of Innovator Finance, and I'm delighted to bring you this Power Hour today as part of our brand new Innovator Finance Leadership and Innovator Series. For this, we're going to be welcoming global bank executives, FinTech founders, influencers, change makers, sharing their personal journeys and vision of the future of financial services. And we're absolutely delighted to kick this series off with the new-ish CEO of Monzo, TS Anil. TS is a highly respected financial services and payments leader with over 25 years of retail banking experience. As Monzo's new CEO, he brings his expertise from Visa, Standard Chartered, Citigroup and Capital One, in roles that have spanned the world, including the US, Singapore, Canada, Japan, and India. He's got a wealth of experience launching new products, developing innovative payment technologies, transitioning existing businesses towards new growth opportunities, and an awful lot more in between that I'm sure I've missed out. So today, TS is going to kindly share some insights into his career journey, discussing both his professional and personal experiences, the challenges and barriers, and his transition over to the exciting world of FinTech. So TS, thank you so much for joining today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Charlotte. Thanks for having me. And it is Thanksgiving here in the US, so much to be grateful for in this very surreal year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've got a few hours until your turkey, so we will kick you off and then make sure you're done and dusted by then. So let's start about how it all began. And I don't know if we're allowed to call you a veteran after 25 years, because I've done 25 years now and I don't like the word veteran, but certainly you do have a huge amount of experience. Perhaps you can just share, what your first job was. How did you get into this crazy world of payments? And tell us a little bit about the journey.
Sure. So yeah, I don't like the word veteran either, but it keeps getting bandied around, so it is what it is. So first job, interesting. So if I skip past one-off gigs like being a radio DJ and things like that, I was part of a generation of kids in India that went straight from high school to undergrad to business school. And so I was a freshly minted MBA at 21 when I started working. My first job was with Citibank in India. And it was a wildly exciting time because Citi was essentially building out retail banking in India at the time. So it was terrific to be a part of that because you worked with insanely talented people. You did everything from what seemed like incredibly strategic work to incredibly operational stuff. And, in a lot of ways, what we define as the startup culture now is what that was all about. So yeah, so my first real job was with Citibank, working on personal loans and mortgages and selling it, underwriting it, trying to teach the market what the product itself was. Really fun.
Great. And how long were you doing that for?
Did that for about 6 years in different roles in different parts of India as well. And so it was, there was a sense of a country like India also sort of transforming itself and being a part of that change around you as well. So yeah, terrific few years over there, and made even more amazing because of the people that I said I got the chance to work with, right? Mentors, bosses, colleagues, and that was a really significant part of that experience, right? People that challenged you were really hard asses in lots of different ways, but they set really high standards and modeled high standards as well. So it was, still some of my best friends, still people that I'm inspired by and doing different and fun things all around the world.
So it sounds like you had some great mentors and supporters. Were they the ones who gave you the inspiration? How did they encourage you? How did that set you on the path?
Sure. The context is an interesting one because, as I said, India itself was sort of emerging at the time, which meant that a lot of infrastructure aspects that we take for granted in other parts of the world just didn't exist at quite the same way. And a simple example was if you wanted to launch a credit card business, would send a monthly statement out to all customers. The post office couldn't handle that volume. So you actually had to build mail sorting centers that could sort the mail and give it to the post office in a way that they could process it. So, we would joke that ideas were really cheap, strategy was cheap, but getting it done was everything. So that last mile focus on execution was an incredibly important part of it. So, bosses, mentors, leaders in the business had to really inspire teams to get it done and really focus on that last edge of the detail of it. And they sweated those details as well. So it was inspirational because these were people who worked incredibly hard. And in that was the inspiration as well. There was a vision of what we could build. And, they didn't hesitate to challenge. Work-life balance was a couple of decades, earlier, even as a concept. So you just worked incredibly hard and got a lot of stuff done. And you learned like crazy along the way. And that stayed with me the whole time. Yeah.
It's a fascinating country, and I spent a lot of time personally in India. And I must admit, everywhere I've gone internationally, it's definitely up there in my favourites. Now, obviously, you then moved around quite a lot. I think you went from India to the US, back to Asia, to Singapore, Japan. I presume that was for change, for jobs. And was that part of the plan, or is that something that just came along and surprised you?
Yeah, in hindsight, it does feel like it was all part of a grand plan. At the time, it sort of happened organically, and then that it fueled this desire to be on this adventure. I'm really blessed that that's the way it's worked out. And, the moves across companies or continents were all fueled by this combination of, I guess, being incredibly lucky, right place, right time, that opportunities emerged, but also a deep desire for that, sense of wanting new experiences, both personal and professional. And yeah, so it's been a ton of moves for me, for the family, a ton of very different kinds of experiences as well, Charlotte. So even though nominally these are all, roles in the broader banking, financial services, payments world, they were wildly different companies at different, parts of the life cycle, very different culturally, both as companies, but also in the context they operated. So was, really lucky to get that set of opportunities. So after I worked at Citi for a few years, like I said, where getting it done was everything. When I first got the call from Capital One for a role in the US and went in for the interview, it was eye-popping, right? Because the interview process for that was all case studies, not the sit back in an armchair and strategize kind of case studies, but here's a pencil, here's a piece of paper, and let's do the math kind of case studies, right? Write an equation, draw a graph. And it gave me a sense of sort of creaking rusty parts of my brain, sort of moving and locking into place. And it was insane because it just felt like, oh, there's this whole other part to me that I, would love to explore, develop, learn on, and so on. So I wanted that challenge. So that's how the move from Citibank to Capital One to the US happened in the first instance. And then from that point on, it was the same thing about, getting excited about change. And, now in hindsight, there are words that one can put around all of it, right? The desire to sort of grow in different ways, the desire to pack in new experiences into this one life we have. But at the time, it was really about getting excited about that change and the next thing. And I think each of the changes I've done working across these different countries and companies came about not as a desire to leave something. So always feel like I never left a company. Certainly didn't leave it because I hated it or was bored by it or any of that. I felt like it was just a sense of being drawn to something else, drawn to the next sort of leg of this adventure. And my wife and I have always joked that when everything is great, we're going to go pick it up and go do something different. So that's been the feeling. And each of these places where we've lived and where we've worked has given us something completely different. At Japan and India and the US could be on 3 different planets for all anybody cared.
Who was Japan? Who was Japan with?
With Citibank. I was
Okay.
CEO of Citi's subsidiary there.
Right. I mean, it's quite some cultural change, but you must have a pretty wide base of friends around the world. And I should have said to people listening, if you do want to put in a question, please do put it into the Q&A function, and we will be taking questions a bit later. Let's talk about barriers and obstacles. And I don't think it's something people talk about it enough. But there are barriers obviously along the way. However great you are at your job and the best organization, just be interested in talking about some of those and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, there's barriers and challenges you encounter, right? We just talking about Japan, so maybe start there. Just figuring out how to work effectively in a different culture is a huge deal, right? So in Japan, that sense of really being from outside of the culture was real, because the obvious thing you encounter is that you don't speak the language, and my management team was 70-80% only spoke Japanese. So you can imagine it was like being in a movie with subtitles all the time, because I had an interpreter with me, and like watching a movie with subtitles, after the first few minutes you kind of forget that you're processing 2 tracks, the visual and the subtitles, and it became like that for me. So the language barrier was never the big one. The cultural barrier was not trivial. Understanding how to lead when your team has very different motivations and a very different cultural context from you. Understanding how to negotiate a business deal, right? When does no not mean no? When does yes not quite mean yes? Right? Figuring stuff like that out, huge deal. Another barrier is sort of learning and getting good at completely new skills, right? I described Capital One and the sort of analytical approach to the business model coming after my years of thinking last mile execution was about really learning that set of skills. And, at Capital One, we would joke that what we called marketing, the rest of the world called maths, right? We spoke in Excel sheets with each other and sort of thought about everything in that way. And with all of these changes, you also, in some ways, have to build completely new networks and new mentors and new support systems, because you're now in a context where something else matters. And it's not how and where you grew up. It's not how and where you've learned your professional skills. So you build that from scratch all over again, and you earn credibility all over again. And that's, I describe all of these as barriers, but each of like any barrier, when you actually do the hard yards and cross the barrier, it's also exhilarating, right? To have learned a new skill and sort of achieved something in a completely different context. And then not to underestimate what it means at a personal level, right? The obvious stuff, right? Finding the right school for your kids settling in, making new friends, building a life, and what do you do for fun in a new place, and how do you actually create a whole ecosystem of life, because ultimately, you're living, right? It's the work is an aspect of it, right? So how do you actually build all of that again and again? I don't know whether this is part of your question, Charlotte, but when you think, as you sort of talk about barriers, and I think about myself having worked in different settings, I'm often asked also about what it has been to be a brown person or a person of color in these different settings. And so because I grew up in India where everyone was a shade of brown, that thing has never been a part of my identity, and I get that that's a privilege, right? It's a privilege to have an identity that is not anchored around that. And yet I'm sure it's been a barrier along the way in different settings, and it's come up from time to time, but it's really not been a thing. And I feel lucky about that. I worked in companies which didn't care where you were from, what you look like, or any of that, and placed bets on you and challenged you and gave you exciting opportunities regardless.
And how's your Japanese? Did you manage to learn it?
At the time, I could understand a fair amount and could save my life, tell someone that I was allergic to shellfish, show the right amount of courtesy. And, I knew all the different ways in which you say, nice to meet you, right? All the way from what you'd say informally to when you were really sucking up, right? So got pretty good, but unfortunately with Japanese, you don't get to use it that much outside of Japan, unlike so many other languages like Chinese or
Yeah,
Spanish, or
yeah.
which you can use extensively. Japanese now has gotten a lot rustier.
Yeah, no, well, I'm with you. I cover Japanese clients, and the only thing I ever remember is the difference between 12 and 20. Because when we were taking orders on the trading floor, that made quite a big difference. And it's quite
Oh, it
easy
does.
to mix those up.
Yeah.
So the same thing there. Let's talk about obviously moving to Monzo, and you're sitting there in a t-shirt, hanging out in California. So you're looking like a fintech challenger bank CEO. But obviously you have been in traditional FS for since the beginning of your career. How different is it to run a whole new digital bank? And Monzo's not quite so new now, but I think we still would call it one of the new banks. And what persuaded you to make the switch?
Sure. So it's different for sure. It's different, and it's different for in a ton of different ways. Like I said, it could be it's in the same industry of financial services, but it's companies, one company from another can be completely different. So what persuaded me to make the switch? So it's interesting if I rewind this back several experiences ago. I had tried like hell to reinvent industries while working inside of incumbent players, but it's really hard, and it's really hard for all of the obvious reasons. Legacy technology, legacy mindsets put really big barriers to reinventing the industry from within. And it's even harder, of course, when there are successful legacy business models, when something is working, right? To try and drive change is crazy hard. But that remained a deep desire because it really felt to me like every other sector around the world was being reinvented with technology, with players getting at it with first principles, but banking had been slow to move in that respect. So when I first met the Monzo team, gosh, I want to say 18 months ago, a spark ignited, because in Monzo, I saw, a team that was truly mission focused, right? Not lip service, not bumper sticker, but really everybody in the company believed deeply in this mission that we're going to make money work for everyone. And, beyond the mission itself at that level, they had truly invented a world-class product and an experience that was built on a brand new homegrown tech platform. And I've been around core banking systems forever, and haven't seen one as amazing as this one. So I saw all of that, and I saw that Monzo had built real customer love by really trying to do the right things for customers, building stuff that they really want to use, and had done it all not in a boutique sort of way, but at scale. And I also saw that Monzo was just getting started. A lot remained to be done. But boy, what an exciting opportunity to build this bank of the future. So, through all the career changes and everything that I've done, the sweet spot for me has always been this place where I feel like I'm going to learn a ton, right? This is going to completely add new dimensions, new something to me, and where I can have impact. So that sweet spot has always jazzed me. And in Monzo, I've got that sense that, every day I come over here, I'm going to learn like a crazy amount of stuff. And even through that initial few months when I was meeting different people and trying to figure out what, whether it was for me, I didn't leave a single room not feeling like, gosh, that was a really bright person. Gosh, I really learned a ton in that conversation, whether this was, the founders, or whether it was a junior engineer or anybody that I encountered. So that spark caught fire, and here we are. And
presumably you think that's obviously an advantage coming from your background, and that must bring you that wealth of experience into that environment.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, so Monzo is just getting started, right? In that, even though we have close to 5 million customers, who are not just measured by in terms of how many people have signed up, but how active they are with us, and the ways in which they use us, and the ways in which they continue to grow with us. It's a terrific place to be at. And what's exciting is that there's much, much more coming as well. We've only just getting started in terms of the products that we're bringing to market and ways in which we're going to help customers continue to manage their money. So that's really exciting. So, in terms of what it means for what, I'm bringing into Monzo. So, I'd say there's a few different kinds of things that I hope to be able to bring into the mix. The one big one is sort of a diverse set of experiences solving problems at scale. So we're at the stage where we're really at liftoff and have achieved scale, and our opportunities are ones of scale. So across technology, banking, leadership, having been pushed to sort of solve problems at scale, I think that's a big one. The second, and this to the whole veteran dig, Charlotte, when you've raced around the block a few times, you also learn some strength and resilience and perspective as you go, which I think is useful, especially in sort of a macro context that is as crazy as the one we're in right now. And I think I bring up passion for going after this mission, passion for saying, look, I really want to be a part of a team that builds this bank of the future that delights millions and millions of customers around the world and really makes their lives easier, demystifies banking and gives them access to being in control of their money and making their money work for them. So yeah, I'm hoping that's what I can bring into the mix here.
Well, if it's any consolation, I think I remember at the end of the 90s going, we're never going to see so much technological change as we have in the last decade.
Well, there you go.
I'd gone from learning how to type on a manual typewriter through to my first mobile phone and thought, my God, 15 minutes a month and they give that to me for free. And now look, let's talk about, you touched on it there, sort of secrets to success. What would you say is your leadership style? And, and has that adapted at Monzo or is Monzo changing that?
Yeah, it's always a hard one to answer what's your leadership style kind of question, because I feel like that's best answered by the people you work with, who see you outside in and see the manifestation of anything that you believe. Yeah. So anything I describe now is sort of the aspirational stuff for me. I think one big thing for me is balancing across the trifecta of IQ, EQ, and what I describe as XQ, the execution quotient. Right, so balancing across that stuff, try to build great strategy, try to do it with the right emotional leadership aspects of it, and getting stuff done. So that's a big aspirational thing for me, always has been. From a leadership style perspective, I think whatever you are as a leader starts with who you are as a person. So I think for me, trust as the bedrock of relationships, personal or professional, is a pretty big deal. And so building that trust, and it's a loaded word, it's a big word. So it means very different things in different kinds of contexts, what trust means and what are the barriers to building trust with, colleagues and team members and leaders and people, in the external ecosystem is a hard one, but investing in that, knowing that it matters more than anything else is key. There's this other one, which is a big one for me, which is setting and holding high standards and doing the right thing. People often describe that as a trade-off, but I think that's a false binary, because I think you can do them both. You can hold high standards and do the right thing. You can give feedback and be kind, which is a Monzo value, by the way, and so on. So I deeply believe that false binaries are not useful. And the question is, how do you do them both? And how does each one build on the other? How can you set high standards as a way of doing the right thing? And how can you do the right thing as a way of setting high standards? So that's a big one for me. Focusing on outcomes is important, because I feel like, so much conversation can be about what you put into something, but tracking myself, tracking the business, the people I work with towards driving results, driving an outcome that's great for customers is important. And then there's many other threads there, Charlotte, and I could go on and on, right? But I really believe that who we are shows up, who we truly are shows up. And that means, strengths and weaknesses, your whole self basically shows up at work every day. It's a question of, what are you aware, how aware are you of those different parts of you, and how do you actually, bring it all to bear effectively? So in a world where we tend to focus a lot on development needs and what can you do better and what are your weaknesses and so on, I also deeply believe that, you have to leverage your strengths. You have to leverage the suit you bring, that your lead suit, right? Play that effectively while you manage through everything else as well. So that's important. I think building deep relationships is key for me as well with the team I work with the stakeholders and everyone, because relationships give me energy, they challenge me, they ground me. So having that at work is huge for me as well.
Yeah, that's great. And it can't be easy doing this by Zoom, and trying to set up a new business. I mean, you're splitting your time, I think, between.
I'm definitely in the
US
category of
and
people
UK.
that can't wait to be back in an office, Charlotte. I'm definitely in the category of people that are like, give me an office full of people. And the world of Zoom and video calls has gone on for like about 9 months too long, in my view. I love the flexibility of it. I love the freedom of being able to manage work and life. And, the best models in my mind are a hybrid version of people having the flexibility. But yeah, give me a whiteboard and people and, that camaraderie every day of the week.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think anyone who can find a way to whiteboard during a Zoom session is going to be a winner. But hopefully won't be too long. This is a day where we're celebrating in London the fact that we can actually go and meet people outside in the middle of winter. So I think we've set our standards a bit lower now.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Yeah, no, exactly. How crazy is that? I can go and eat outside in the middle of winter, and I'm happy about it. What advice would you give to, a lot of people are looking at the fintech sector, and people who know what fintech is, oh my God, this is so exciting, and this is the next thing, and it's entrepreneurship and it's innovation, and I think that's great, and we love promoting that. Others don't really understand what it means. They think finance and tech, and you certainly talk to young girls about fintech, and they go, finance or tech, that's just not me. What advice is it for people starting on their own career journey, and maybe with a lens of innovation?
Charlotte, you were joking a few minutes ago about feeling sometime in the 90s that, gosh, how much change has happened in the world of technology. And, two decades on, that pace has only accelerated. Yeah. And so, since you're asking the question of people starting out now, I think that's the first and most important thing, that, if we think there's been a lot of change in the last couple of decades, I think that's only going to accelerate in the next 10. Certainly the convergence of a whole bunch of big tech trends around, the obvious AI type of stuff, but everything else, that convergence is going to accelerate change. The social political context is going to be an interesting one to watch in the next decade. And many of the business models that we've seen emerge in the last decade or so are going to get even more scale. So I think the next decade is an interesting one. So getting into that decade as someone starting out the career, there's this wonderful line which says, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that does not exist. So, it's a line that's always rung true for me. So I think the first thing I'd say to anyone starting out now is, like, just keep learning, be insanely passionate about learning new stuff, new tricks, new skills, new technologies, and so on, because that's just the world we're going to operate in. But not just the hard stuff around technology, right? And skills, but also the adaptivity that you need inside of you to help, adjust to change, but not adjust in a passive sense, but enjoy, leverage, embrace change as well. So I think that's probably the big one. Cliche alert. It really is about the journey. So careers can get defined as, what am I going to be when I finally reach this last big role of my career and stuff like that. But it isn't really, because there's a lot of years before you get to whatever you define as the end. And those years had better be fun and better be, times when you feel excited about what you do and you're growing and you're working with people you enjoy and all of that stuff. So it's not about getting there, and therefore make good choices about what do you think will help you grow best? What do you think will make you enjoy work every day when you show up at work? Right? The people you work with, the thing you're working on, right? Make sure that you solve for that and not for some elusive sort of end state. And courage, I think, right? Be willing to mix it up, toss it up, change it up. Courage to place a bet on yourself, right? If I'm unwilling to bet on myself and my ability to get something done, how on earth am I going to expect someone else to place that bet? right? So have the courage to say, yeah, I'll figure it out. And, I'm going to try it. And if it doesn't work, the important thing is I'll figure something else, right? I'll be able to adapt to the outcome that this choice results in. I think that's a big one, because stuff is going to keep changing a lot, so you need to be able to sort of roll with it.
I guess you wouldn't have, it's going from city in India to Monzo, where you're splitting your time between the US and the UK. It's not a journey you probably thought you were going to be on.
For sure, it wasn't. Yeah.
And perhaps before we move to Q&A, I have to ask, because there has been an article about you dancing. So I'm desperate to ask you, what do you do? I mean, aside from the dancing, Brother Sifton got that right. What do you do to relax and and escape from the demands of the job? And I think potentially, through lockdown as well, where it's it is pretty demanding. Just sitting it doesn't sound very demanding sitting at a screen, but I think everyone recognizes it is. What's the fun in your life?
Yeah, so that dancing headline, I've said to everybody that's asked me about that headline that it's not a headline I'm ever going to be able to either live down or, even worse, live up to. So let's just leave that one on the side. What do I do to relax and escape from the demands of my job? So I'm a big reader, and it's never enough. And I keep thinking, all my life at every phase I've thought, like, gosh, I'm not reading enough, but it's a passion. And I read all sorts of stuff. Not so much business books as much as, good quality fiction, all the way to pulp fiction and a bunch of stuff around that. I'm crazy about music, music from all over the world. So again, across genres, from, classic rock that I grew up on to, world music from different parts of the world. That's a pretty big deal. So, unwinding with music is my big thing to do. I have a wife and 2 boys, blessing of my life. It's fun to hang out together, bicker, banter, kick back, hang out, get a few drinks. It's, it's huge. And then, Charlotte, people have always given me energy, right? My parents, in-laws were as much friends as anything else. And friends from along my life, right? Friends who ground me, take the piss out of me, give me joy, give me energy. And so, the best way for me to escape anything else is, call a friend. And then in a normal world, it would be call a friend and say, let's go get a drink, or let's hang out tonight, or whatever else. And that's sort of the bedrock of everything.
No, that's for sure. It's probably not a Zoom call. They do it by phone.
That too in this crazy world.
Exactly. Now we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and get through as many as I can before we run out of time. So we've got some work, some personals. We'll do a mix here. So what are the 3 key drivers for the payments vertical within the UK's fintech market?
It's a great question. So the 3 things that are important for any payment ecosystem, and they hold true in the UK as well, is number 1, security, right? It's easy to make, to solve for the tech aspects of payments, but making sure that it's safe and secure as well is a pretty big deal. Financial crime continues to increase in the market. So safety, security, peace of mind is a big one. I think the second one for me is ease, convenience, which manifests itself into great user experiences. So that's the second one. And I think the third thing with payments is that it's an ecosystem. You can't solve for payments by solving one end of the equation. So an ecosystem of use cases, people that accept payments and are able to make it, that's the real fuel of an ecosystem. And lots has happened in the UK market. It is, with faster payments and a well-developed credit debit card market. The UK is one of the more evolved markets in the world for payments, but yeah, plenty to be done going forward as well.
No, that's for sure. So what do you see as the big opportunities for the bank moving forward? And we're being asked about the bank's strategy evolving in 2021 to 2022, and what you can say on
that. Thanks for the wishes. I think it's Ryan who this question seems to be coming from.
I think so. Yeah.
Look, at Monzo, we're focused on our on what we're doing, which is trying to serve as many customers as possible and meet their financial needs by giving them tools to manage their money. So that strategy is not changing. And as we go into the next couple of years, it's about scaling and executing against that as effectively as we can at scale. So that means making new products available to customers that they're excited about and that they're willing to pay for. It means continuing to hold the highest standards possible for the quality of experience and service we provide customers. We consistently get rated the best experience and best service by customers in the UK, and we don't take that lightly. We take that as a huge sort of responsibility, and we continue to raise the bar on ourselves with that. Our net promoter scores, which is how many customers want to recommend you, is 3 or 4 times that of incumbent banks, which is a huge deal, right? And we continue to sort of build on that. There's a ton of new stuff coming, Ryan. There's a ton of new products coming. Which will help customers manage their money across, borrowing needs, payment needs, and every other aspect of the financial life. So there's a lot coming, and I hope you're a customer, because our goal is to keep delighting you with the new stuff. So watch the space.
There you go. And I think we'll keep on the work ones for now. Alex, question from Alex Barkley. Very keen to understand your view on incumbent competitors. I love how everyone calls them incumbents, because the incumbents hate being called incumbents most of the time. And are you going to steal their lunch?
Oh God, I think there's plenty of lunch for everyone to go around. But yeah, our goal is to give people terrific experiences, to give customers great experiences and great tools. And if existing players or high street banks are not able to meet that need, then of course we hope they come to Monzo. So that's the goal. That's what we're focused on. And incumbent banks are of course continuing to raise standards and get better at what they've always been good at. And may the customer make great choices about where they think their needs are best met. We're going to work incredibly hard to serve every single customer in the market.
So I'm going to keep on the lunch theme, but we're going back to personal here from Samantha Seacombe. Japan, US, and India, which has the best culinary experience?
Wow.
Aside from the shellfish, by the sounds of it.
Well, apart from the shellfish. Well, I grew up in India, so there's obviously a soul food aspect to India for me, but across, if I sort of park that on the side, Japan for sure. And not just for Japanese food, by the way, right? The Japanese have crazy high standards for cuisine. So, best Italian food I've had is probably in Tokyo. Best French food I've had is probably in Tokyo. And of course, the wealth and wonder of food that is Japanese cuisine. So yeah, if I had to pick the one foodie destination, it's probably Japan.
That's great. Question from Amy Katecha. How well is the UK's fintech sector placed to take on the huge pace of change in China? Great question. And are we being sufficiently collaborative? And what are the opportunities?
It's a great question. I think the Chinese fintech industry grew in a sort of unique cocktail of China emerging, plus a sort of relatively hands-off regulatory environment, and this crazy leapfrogging enabled by technology. So I think that those three sort of forces came together in shaping China's fintech world, and you're seeing the impacts of that. And some of those things have receded, but the big Chinese tech giants have obviously gotten massive scale and dominance in the market. What do I think about the UK's ability to compete with China? Well, for the most part, I think as it relates to the UK consumer, the gauntlet is thrown down for us, right, of what's possible and what we're already building. So I feel really good about our ability to create experiences that customers love in ways that will be best in class anywhere in the world. We operate in a different regulatory context than China. And as Monzo, we've chosen to be a regulated bank, right? Because we truly believe that's the way to earn customers' trust and keep the trust, and which sets different standards on us relative to, another country where it's lightly regulated or not regulated. And, it means we have to meet higher standards, and we welcome those higher standards. So it's different. But I have no doubts about our ability to succeed and make, amazing products available to consumers in whichever market we choose to play.
And I think we had a question similar to that on sort of, what makes your core banking system stand out, but maybe what can it do that other systems can't? And a question on sort of which vendors you work with.
Let me start at the tail end of that question then. Right, it's a homegrown platform. So it's been built by some of the smartest engineering minds in the world that came together to build a banking system, a banking platform, which is entirely microservices architected. So that's a huge difference relative to legacy banking stacks that I've worked with. And what that ends up resulting in is that in the legacy banking stacks, it takes a lot of effort to drive change and to innovate because it's just the way the whole system is architected. Whereas at Monzo, we can keep iterating a lot faster. We can make changes, we can roll back stuff that's not working. And our ability to therefore move at pace is huge, and our ability to configure for different needs is huge. So it's terrific in that respect, and we don't work with vendors just yet. I mean, over time we will bolt on capabilities where we feel like this is not an area we can differentiate in, and we may as well just get an industry standard, best-in-class sort of platform or a capability that we bolt on. But the core of it is absolutely a differentiator. We can build product faster, we can ship stuff faster, and we can do it all at scale. That's the most amazing thing. Like I said, we're close to 5 million customers already and growing really fast. And the system scales beautifully as well.
Yep, that's great. I'm going to group a couple of questions together. We got sort of talking about what type of people Monzo is looking for when hiring new employees. But also, related to employment, how do you get new employers to give you a chance to learn new opportunities without the prior experience? And I don't know if maybe those go together, maybe they don't.
I didn't get the second part of the question. Was that employer?
So the second one was, it was saying that, how do you get new employers to give you a chance to learn new opportunities, when you don't have the experience already, which sort of links into FinTech, because no one comes out of, even if you do a FinTech course, I don't think that necessarily means you can work in every FinTech, so just be interested in what the type of people you see to hire.
Sure. Look, in terms of the people we want to hire at Monzo, we want to hire people at Monzo that bring that spark, which is a combination of really good at something they bring real expertise and do something. They're incredibly fast learners and can adapt in a fast growing environment. And the thing that wraps it all together, they've got to be passionate about the mission. So at whatever level of seniority, we've had a bunch of really experienced senior people in the company as well this past year. And what's common across experienced hires and people just getting started is that they're crazy excited about building the bank of the future, excited about our mission to make money work. And that, you can't coach that, teach that, buy that. So that comes from within. So that's what we look for at Monzo. The other question was, how does one get new employers to place a bet? So I think it's that answer is not that different than what I just said. The learning thing comes to the top of that list. So if it's a skill where you haven't already demonstrated experience, showing an employer that you have the humility that you don't have it already, evidencing to an employer that you've got that learning muscle, the aptitude, the attitude to learn, can take you a long way to getting someone to place a bet. Because if you don't have that experience, trying to fake it only works against you. So being humble, saying, look, on this job, I expect this is the thing that I need to learn. And here's why I believe I'm a good learner. Here's evidence of the fact that, I've been tossed into these situations and I picked this stuff up really quickly. And here's how I learn, will go a long way to actually bridging that gap.
So now we're being asked to, we talked about the change in the banking sector, but you're being asked to say what it looks like in 10 to 20 years. And you're talking about the big players find it difficult to change. And I think the second part of this question is really interesting because it says, do customers appreciate the long track record of a bank when it comes to their money? And how do you persuade, perhaps follow on, how do you persuade those customers to move to Monzo?
Let me answer that second part of the question first. as at Monzo, like I said, we don't take customer trust lightly. We've chosen to be a regulated bank as opposed to sort of just a fintech player playing on the edges of the industry. So we take that responsibility very seriously. And I think that comes through to customers. Ultimately, trust is built in lots of different ways, and there's lots of proxies for trust. I think, longevity of a bank, whether it's been around for hundreds of years, works for some people, works in some instances, and I don't, kind of underestimate that. So the bar on us is higher. So when we show up, the ways in which we build trust across touch points for the customers, the way they onboard, the tools we make available to them, the way we communicate with them, right? There's lots of ways in which it's possible to communicate and confuse the daylights out of customers about what's going on, right? We strive every day of the week at every touch point to explain our products and services in ways that my mom can understand, right? In ways that are intuitive. And ultimately you build trust by being transparent like that with customers, explaining it to them in ways that they understand and not hiding behind big words and fine print and stuff like that. And that's what we strive to do every day of the week. And I think the proof of the pudding over here is in the fact that customers do place that trust with us and are continuing to sort of come to Monzo to bring the financial relationship to Monzo and move their money to us because we earn that trust, and more importantly, we work hard to keep it every day.
Great. Now going back to personal question, and this is your love of reading and your books behind you. Any reading recommendations? Finance, tech, and non-finance tech.
Oh gosh, I have a long list of books. And I'm usually reading 2 or 3 different books at the same time.
Wow.
So I don't have to have a single big recommendation, but the book I'm reading right now is called Nickel Boys, which is just a heartbreaking novel, alongside with reading, what is a denser book, but it's fictionally set around the world of philosophy, it's called At the Existentialist Cafe, which is a terrific read about the existentialist philosophers. And I'm going really slow through that because it's a dense read, but it's a fascinating read. So yeah, lots of books at any point in time. I don't know that one book stands out as the recommendation I'd give you.
Or perhaps we can start books for TS. You could have a whole stream of them. Just one request. Can you give your quote again on "Learners inherit the earth"? That's clearly piqued someone's interest.
Sure. I think it's a philosopher called William Gibson, if I'm not mistaken, although I'm not confirming that. But the line goes, "In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that does not exist."
There we go. Hopefully somebody got at that, and it'll be on record if you need to get that later. Let's talk about a couple of questions on path to profitability, your new product pipeline, what's coming through. And if you can't comment on the product pipeline, perhaps you can comment on what you'd like to develop in the product pipeline. What do you get asked about a lot?
Sure. Path to profitability, we're continuing to grow. Being profitable is important to us, and we'll get there. We feel confident about that. So that's an easy one. On the product pipeline, I think the way to think about this is look across your financial wallet today, across needs of making payments, saving, borrowing, and everything beyond that. We are in this to be able to provide tools that help a customer manage all aspects of their financial life. So expect innovation and new products and services coming from Monzo across each of those things. What does borrowing look like in the next few years? And what can Monzo do uniquely to make borrowing that delightful experience and the experience that gives you control? What are the different ways, we talked about payments a few minutes ago already and what it takes for, a payment ecosystem. Expect us to do everything across that spectrum as well. And so, the way to think about what products we will be, adding to our roadmap and bringing to our customers, just think across that financial life and know that someone in Monzo is starting to think about how do we reinvent that? How do we actually make it not just meet your needs, but also delight you along the way. And yeah, if anybody has ideas of stuff that they want to see, please reach out.
It's great. And yeah, interesting question here, and we had another one on climate change. So I'm trying to group these. We've got so many coming in. There's a lot of innovation, obviously, in fintech. Is there any problem you feel isn't receiving enough attention yet? Somebody mentioned about Latin America, and also, there's another question on what your role is if you envisage playing in the climate change net zero agenda. And the only reason I've put those together is I know there are some fintechs who are looking at pivoting into that and providing more information. I know the millennials are certainly very focused on that.
Sure. So on the first one, look, it's an uneven world, right, in terms of problems that are not being solved. And someone mentioned, and you mentioned Latin America, Charlotte, as well. So I think what's interesting when you look at the global landscape of fintech is the ways in which leapfrogging is happening. So sometimes some of the most innovative things in fintech are happening in the least quote unquote developed markets, because they're sort of skipping whole generations of evolution. And given the infrastructure constraints in that country, they're sort of bypassing that all to just build the end state, right? So digital payments as a thing in so many countries, digital banking as a thing in so many countries, just crossed the stages of evolution, which were about current accounts with passbooks and stuff like that. And people have gone directly from cash stuffed under your pillow in a little hut, all the way directly into the world of mobile banking. So it's uneven, and there's a ton of attention, in different markets. Now, the second part of your question, Charlotte, do you want to say that one more time? I forgot. Was more pointed as it related to Monzo.
Yeah, it was on climate change, yes, and net zero, and what role you envisage Monzo playing.
Sure. So, I'd say a couple of things. I think as mission focused as we are, the natural sort of consequence of that is being incredibly responsible citizens, right? Citizens in a corporate sense, citizens as individuals. So climate change is one of those things where we will set high standards for ourselves in terms of what we do and meet those standards. I suspect, though, that that's not where we will differentiate, meaning on climate change, I don't know that Monzo can be uniquely doing something in the world as it relates to climate change. So I think my general bias is that as Monzo, we should meet very high standards across all of these aspects of social responsibility, climate change obviously being a big one. But where we should double down should be where we think we can make a unique impact, whether that's financial inclusion, financial management. That's where I think we can differentiate, right? We should, and we should bring that unique value to the world.
Yeah, great. Now I'm going to give you an out in a minute, so you can sit there and choose whether you can answer the many questions I'm getting on Starling and your views on that. We're also getting questions on retail and business banking. Some people have talked about layoffs that has happened at Monzo, but let's maybe move that to the way forward. And what's your response for that, and where's your growth? And then you can choose if to talk about Starling or not.
Yeah, I mean, look, I respect Starling and have not much to add to that conversation. If I talk about Monzo, as you know, we are in retail banking and in business banking. We launched a business banking product back in March, and that has continued to grow incredibly fast, faster than anybody in the market. And it's because we're making the same ideas available in the business world that we have done in the retail customer world, which is bring tools that help people manage their money. And in business banking, we will continue to sort of hold those same standards for ourselves. And so for us, it's not a retail banking or business banking question. We will absolutely play in both those segments because we think there are unmet needs in both places, and we can differentiate and bring unique Monzo magic to both retail and business segments.
That's great too. Now, I'm being asked, are you on Twitter? Now, important question.
I am on Twitter. I'm less active on Twitter than I'd like to be, but yeah, I will dial that up.
We'll find out. We'll find out the Twitter handle and send that over. Good question here. What's it like picking up the reins of a business from a founder?
It's exciting in the sense that there's huge respect for Tom and everything that the Monzo team have already accomplished. As I said, we're also just getting started. There's so much to be done still. So yeah, it's been exciting to pick up the reins from all the stuff that's already been built, and I stand on the shoulders of giants as we take Monzo to the next level. So it's exciting. Yeah.
And another question I get asked a lot, but on big tech, and big tech coming into financial services, and obviously we experienced from India and WhatsApp payments there, but we've had Google branded bank account in the US. Do you see big tech as a threat? Do you think they complement? What's the opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know that the answer is going to be simple enough in the sense of painting the whole sector in one bucket versus another. So I think there will be elements of it which are possibly a threat to many players, but also huge opportunities to partner and build new stuff. Because when you look at big tech, they're also enabling the proliferation of connectivity. They're also enabling the proliferation of experiences and customers getting digitally savvy. So that's a great platform for players like us to build on when we build a specific industry on the back of that. So, will they compete? I'm sure they will in some ways. And we welcome that, right? Someone holding us to higher standards is inspiring. And I think as it relates to Monzo, we are unique in what we have built, and we've done it at scale. And I think there's so much for us to keep building on and moving from strength to strength on it. And continue to wow our customers that I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it.
Yeah. And I'm going to take one final question, just because I've noticed on time, and I've promised to get everyone off by the hour. We'll try to group some of this together. And I think it's around the scaling piece of it, short-term objectives. Are you able to continue with innovation when obviously as you scale? And then maybe you can finish up on a question about who are they competitors you most admire, or maybe entrepreneurs you most admire. And what aspects do you want to emulate at Monzo?
There's a lot in there. Let me answer the can we innovate at scale thing. Absolutely. That as businesses grow in size, I think it's important to figure out what the barrier to innovation can become and make sure that doesn't show up. I already mentioned our technology platform scales and allows us to continue to configure and build new products easily. So that's not going to be the barrier. Mindset can become a barrier. And if you talk to people at Monzo and you just realize how much passion there is for shipping new products and building exciting new tools for customers, I don't think mindset is anything other than an enabler of innovation for Monzo. And when you scale, you also get the ability to have greater impact. So in some ways, done right, innovation in a player that is large can actually be more exciting, can actually be enabled in more exciting ways as well. So that was that part of your question. There was 2-3 other things that you popped in there, Charlotte.
Yeah, I know. I throw them all at you because I feel guilty for leaving so many on the table. But just which of the competitors you admire? I'm going to sort of allow you to put the entrepreneurs you most admire, and anything you want to emulate.
So I admire lots of players across sectors, and have a favorite music streaming service and a favorite retailer and a favorite little cafe down the street, which makes me feel like it's deeply personal and a great experience. So so I don't think of I don't have to restrict myself to competitors I admire, because I think as in the way the world is playing itself out, you learn across sectors and you bring the best of what's working in different sectors to the mandate that you have in your particular company. So there's a broad range there, Charlotte.
Yeah. Well, TS, we are coming up to the hour, which is unbelievable. I feel like we've grilled you completely. But thank you so much for answering such a wide range of questions as well and sharing your journey. And I've had some, already getting some amazing feedback on the session. We wish you all the best, in your tenure at Monzo. As you say, six months in a startup is a long time. 6 months in the brand new startup during lockdown is quite incredible. And taking that to the next evolution. And we're really excited to have you back in a few months' time to tell us a bit more. For everyone else, our next session in this series is with the CFO of Square. So we're staying over in the US, Amrita Ahuja, who will join us on the 10th of December at 5 p.m. UK time. It'll be very interesting to hear from her as well. But for now, TS, thank you so much. Great session. Really appreciate your honesty and your openness.
Thank you, Charlotte.
And we look forward to having you back.
It's been great chatting with you, and look forward to continuing the conversation and to this incredibly engaged audience, because there's tons of questions that I see on the chat that I can't even read at the moment. But yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, and thanks everyone.